Okay, let's talk about Mpoomy Ledwaba's new book. This is my honest opinion. First things first, I read this book in a period of less than a week. It was almost a weekend. I actually got it on Thursday. I was on a walk and I was listening to a podcast of her and her husband speaking about the book, right? So she's on tour, currently talking about her book at every place that she can. Understandable. Marketing is important. So I'm like, actually, let me walk to the bookstore and get my own copy. That's what I did because I was so compelled from what I heard. Because it felt like, okay, look, this lady is very relatable because we're not far in age. I think she's about 2 years older than me. I listen to her podcast. I follow her on social media. I've got a grasp of her, and I have for quite a while. So I'm like, let me go grab this book. And also there was a lot of talk about it because of all the work and marketing that she's been putting into it. Sharp. Now I go and I get the book Thursday. I start reading it. And one thing I will say, look, this was an easy book to read. I will not lie to you. Like, this was a simple book to read to the point where I was done with this book by Sunday. And that's because I took breaks. Like, had I actually just had the time to read this book and really just sit down, but I got busy, life was happening, I was doing a couple of things, so I didn't have all the time I needed to actually just sit down and finish it. But I could have, because it was quite a quick read. But let's get into what I did and what I didn't like about it. Let's start off with what I did like about the book. Number one, the marketing has been great. Like I mentioned, right? The reason I went to that extent where I was like, I need to get this book was because of the way it's been marketed. It's everywhere. You go into a bookstore, they tell you, oh, there's a live reading or there's a session with Mpoomy Ledwaba. Like, you couldn't miss it. Honestly, if you are a book lover in South Africa, you could not miss this book. It was everywhere. I finally, I succumbed to the pressure and I got the book. That's point number one. Point number two, the last half of the book was really relatable content, right? So I'm going to speak about the last half and you'll understand why I'm saying the last half when I get to what I didn't like. Because in the last half, she really opened up. So Mpoomy Ledwaba is married. She's got children. I'm about to get married. I have one child. There's a lot I can relate to her about, right? I'm in a serious relationship, and so there's a lot that I can look at her and say, these are things we go through in serious relationships. You have your ups and your downs. You have things like that. So I felt like in that part of the book was where she was kind of a lot more open in comparison to the first half for me. So here I was reading this book, and halfway through, she starts getting into her marriage. Sharp. She didn't go too in depth with it, I guess for her own reasons. But where I really found that point where I was like, no, now she's speaking to me, was when she started talking about how she was introduced to having sex at a young age and the promiscuity that happened and why she went into it and how she went into it. All these different things, and the sexual trauma she went through. And that's when I was like, oh wow, she really went to a place that a lot of people would not have went to because of how vulnerable and delicate it was. So I really appreciated that from her. I appreciated her look on her relationship with her mom after everything had happened, and just who she is as a woman and how she had to take and re-own her narrative after having gone through, difficult times in her younger childhood. I related on so many levels because when you're growing up, you don't know what you're doing. You kind of just in it, and someone pays attention to you and you go into it and you don't know why. So I think that part really got me to reflect and really think about it. So kudos to her about that. Then the last point is very similar to the last one I mentioned. She opened up about trauma. Trauma is nothing easy to talk about, but I think by talking about it, you are freeing a lot of people. And that was good. That was helpful. And I really liked that. Cool. Now, what did I not like about the book? Firstly, I think there was like a part in the first page of the book where, she's dedicating, the dedication of the book, where the last line she said, and I give you permission to heal. I don't know. For me, that felt like it had a superiority complex for me when I read it. I was like, That's really weird. You know, why I hate to say this, but why do you get permission to give me permission? You know what? Because you've done the work. But like, I don't know. I think that's where I was like, I felt weird about that. Number two, I did not like the reflections. Oh, so what happens is, in the book, if you haven't read it, you read the book, you go through like 2 pages, honestly, and then there's like a 2-page section where you need to like write down your reflections, and they ask you questions. She asks you questions about this and that. Ooh, that bored me. I did not read a single reflection because I was like, I just want to read the story, you know. And I get where she was coming from, you know. I've read those kind of books where they do that. Sarah Jakes does that a lot, where she has a reflection section. I just felt like it was so constant and so unnecessary, because you said, like, you just gave me 2 pages. What am I meant to reflect on right now? Like, just give me more story, then I'll reflect at the end, or maybe every quarter, or give me a reason to reflect that's outside of just reflecting. Because the minute you like make me reflect after every single chapter, I'm like, I have to reflect again, I have to write down. I didn't want to write. And the way I read books is, I write in my books in general, but if I don't feel like it, or there's nothing coming to me, I won't write. And the minute you put pages for me to write, it's very like, no, just write the book, Wena. Don't worry about me and my reflections. Anyways, okay, so a third one, I did spot some spelling and grammar issues. The first one I spotted it 4 pages in, and it really pissed me off, because I had bought this book, and I bought it with my money, and I took out money from my bank and I bought a book. So I don't expect any grammar issues or spelling issues. Like, that for me was like really bad. So I actually got to work that day on Thursday, and I started reading it already, and I showed my colleagues, and I was like, hey guys, I'm reading this book, and 4 pages in, look what it says. Because I didn't want it to look like I'm hating. I was like, do you see what I see? And it was a very obvious like spelling issue, like very obvious. Like, if someone had edited this book, it would not be there. If anyone had read this book before, it would not be there, because someone would have said, there's just a small little issue. It wasn't like a lot. Like, I'm not gonna lie and say, yo, it was all over the place, but it happened. So I just think that it wasn't necessary for it to happen. Cool. Then it goes to, was this book actually edited? I did look around in the book, and if I'm wrong, I think you're welcome to correct me. But I didn't see, like Viola Davis or Will Smith's book, and all these people will say, I wrote this book in conjunction with another writer, like an actual writer. So the beauty of a writer is that they're able to edit your work and make sure it's all in the right places, and there's no spelling issues. There's also, your grammar and your English, they have a way of bringing out the better way of saying things. Whereas I could tell she's writing things because she's used to writing captions. Oh, that's bad. In an unmean way. But she does write a long captions, and she does have her email newsletter. Those are not professional places for writing. When you are writing, you need to be edited. It needs to go through a process. I'm saying this, I am an English literature graduate. I read books for a degree. I read like hundreds of books. I read. So when you now give me a book where I can tell, okay, there's grammar, there's spelling, and also like the structure of the sentences, it's like, this feels like it should have been later in the book, or you could have made this sound a different way, or there's a better way of saying this. You don't have to say things the way you speak. You know what I'm saying? So that's one thing I took away from it. And then, that's the last one, is the structure was, not making sense. I wish, talk about your childhood, talk about this, talk about that. Don't talk about this and then also bring in this and then that and then this and then go back to this. Like, it felt like that for me. It felt like a lot of thoughts were coming in at the same time. That's because the chapters were so short. So you're reading something and then you're moving on and then you're there. Anyways, I gave this book a 5.5. I'm sorry, Mpoomy Ledwaba. I hope that you do better in your next books. I hope that you get this as coming from a kind place and from a person who really, really, I read biographies. I've read biographies. I am not new to a biography. So when you're writing, please take your book to an editor. That's all I'll say. Thank you for the book. Thank you for opening up. Thank you for the relatable content. But take your book to an editor. Anyways, see you on the next one. Sharp.